going to show you how to create a simple dashboard that will provide real-time reporting. We've started creating our dashboard for Site A by importing data from our form sheet. We now need to start converting our data and creating our dashboard. I've created two additional tabs, List and Conversion and Dashboard. I'll use the List and Conversion tab for any lists that I have for drop-down menus and data conversion. I found it's easier to keep track of background processes by organizing my data in this way. When I share my dashboards, I hide the sheet and the import sheet from view. I know I want to create the following features in my dashboard. I want charts, a table that shows data by month, a table that shows the total sessions offered, and a search feature. For my dashboard, I'll start with my charts. I want to show the number of sessions by month and topic, as well as the number of sessions provided by each coach. I would like my charts to be interactive and only show data for the month selected. I will first need to set up my drop-down menu. Going to my List and Conversions tab, I've created a space for months, and I'm going to enter in the months. I want to make sure that the format of my months matches the format I selected in column H here, because my drop-down menu is going to be linked to a formula that is going to filter based upon the match between this month's spelling and this month. Now that I have my list, I can create my drop-down menu that's going to be used to filter my charts. Going over to the Dashboard tab, I've created a space for the drop-down menu where users can select the month they want to view. Clicking in this cell, I'm going to go up to Data, and I'm going to select Validation. My criteria is going to be a list from a range. So I'm going to click on Select Data Range. I'm going to go to my List and Conversions tab, and I'm going to highlight my months. Click OK, and save. Going back to my dashboard, I can see that I now have all of my months listed in my drop-down menu. My next step is going to be to prepare my data for use in my charts, and this is going to require that I do a little bit of data conversion. Going back to my List and Conversions tab, I've set up two areas for Chart 1 data that's going to show the session type offered by month, and Chart 2 data, which will show the sessions offered by coach by month. I've entered in the three options from the form that users can select. You want to make sure that this agrees exactly in terms of spelling and spaces with what is on the form. For example, if you have an extra space after a word, your match may not work. Starting with Chart 1, in order to show the session type offered by selected month, I'm going to use a logical function called Countifs. There are 6 of these that are very useful that are available both in Google and Excel. There's Countif, AverageIf, SumIf, and then the same versions that use multiple criteria to filter data, Countifs, AverageIfs, and SumIfs. What these logical functions allow you to do is to specify criteria that filter your data, and based upon the criteria specified, the functions will only return the count of the number of data that meet those particular criteria. And so to get started with Countifs, I'm going to highlight my cell, equal Countifs, open parentheses. The first thing I want to do is to highlight the range on my Import tab that has the data that I want to filter. And so I know that if I want to show session type by session month, I'm going to need to filter by type and by month. So let's start with type. Going to my import range, I can see that type is listed in column D. And so I'm going to start highlighting. Because I'm planning to accommodate growth up to 500 responses, I'm going to have this run from cell D2 to D500. If at any time I need to modify this, I can just go in and extend the length of my selection. I'm going to do comma, and now that I've specified the criteria range, I need to specify the criteria. I only want it to count the number of times that Google appears in the list, but I have additional criteria. So comma, I want it to return month as well, but I want my month length to my drop-down menu. So the first thing I'm going to do is go back to my Import tab and select the months. Again, planning for growth, I'm going to go down to H500. You want to make sure here that your ranges agree. And so I couldn't have my first range be D2 to D8 and my second range be H2 to H500. They have to have the same number of cells. Comma. And I'm now going to link this on my dashboard tab to the month that is selected in the drop-down menu. I'm going to close parentheses and hit enter. Now I'm showing for May. Let me look at December. And when I select December, I can see there were 3 coaching sessions offered by month. An easy way to get this formula into the next cells is just to drag it. But before I do that, I want to absolute my cell references. So I'm going to go back into my formula and I'm going to highlight on import and click F4. And you'll notice when I do that, 2 number symbols appear. If I hit F4 again, they move. When you have 2 number symbols, this means that D2 and D500 is an absolute reference that cannot be changed. D number sign 2 means that the column range can change, but the row number cannot. And this means that while the column is absolute, the row number can change. I want to make it so that the column is absolute, but the row number can move. I'm going to absolute that reference, and I'm going to absolute cell C5, and I'm going to hit enter. I want to add a little bit of error handling into my formula before I drag it down. Sometimes if there is no data for a particular selection, you may get an error message, and that will cause problems with my chart. And so I'm going to go on and plan for that. I'm going to click in front of Countifs, and I'm going to say if an error is returned, so if error, open parentheses, comma, I want you to return nothing. So 2 quotation marks with nothing in between, close parentheses. I can now drag my formula down. The only thing that's changed in this formula is the match to the session type. So this is showing cell A10 and this is showing cell A11. I'm going to go in and set up my next chart in the same fashion, which is sessions offered by coach by month. I'm going to copy the formula I've already made and I'm going to paste it here. And I'm going to make one small change. So for my chart data 1, I was looking at session type. I need to change that column from D to column B, which is where my names are. And so I'm just going to go in here and make that change. And I'm going to drag my formula down. This is also linked to my drop-down menu. I can now insert my charts. So going to my dashboard tab, I've laid out an area for my chart, so I'm going to just click anywhere in it. It doesn't matter where you click. You can move charts fairly easily. I'm going to go to Insert, Chart. I'm going to select my data. So I'm going to select Data Range. I'm going to go to Listing Conversions and start with Chart 1. And highlight my range. Click OK. I want to show a simple column chart, and so I'm going to select that. And now I'm going to customize. So going to the Customization tab, I'm going to title this Sessions by Month and Topic. I don't want a legend, so I'm going to select None. I'm going to go down to my horizontal axis, and I want to title that Session Type. My left vertical axis, number of sessions. Now I can also specify the minimum and maximum values. And so if I want to show a minimum of 1, or excuse me, a minimum of 0 to a maximum of, let's say, 10, I can do that here. I can also specify my grid lines, major and minor, change the color, change my series, and add data labels if I would like. And I'm going to click Insert. And now I'm just going to highlight my chart and resize it. I now want to test my chart and make sure that everything is working like it's supposed to. I want to see my data change when I select a new month, and that's what's happening. I'm now going to create my second chart, which is going to show sessions by coach and month. I'm now going to test this chart by seeing if the values change as I select a different month. and it looks like everything is working as it should. The next feature I would like to add is the average number of attendees by month. And so what I've done here is I've just created a table by highlighting this area, adding in the borders, changing the color of the fonts, and then adding in my months. This is going to be static data that will not be affected by the selection from the drop-down menu. Rather, it's always going to show the average number of attendees by month. In order to do this, I'm going to use the average if function. The average if function works a little bit differently than the Countifs function. Clicking in cell I8, I'm going to go up to my formula bar and I'm going to type in average if, open parentheses. The first thing that I want to specify with an average if formula is my criteria range. So what am I going to be filtering my data based upon? Here it's going to be month, and so I'm going to go to my import tab and I'm going to select month. I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to go down to H500 as I have done with my other formulas, and I'm going to insert a comma. I'm next going to specify the criteria. So I've set up the range. The criteria is filter based upon month name. So anything in this column that matches January, I want you to average. The last thing I need to specify is the average range. So what column do I want averaged? And that would be the average number of attendees. And this would be column E. And so I'm going to highlight. I want to make sure I'm going down to E500. As with the Countif and ifs function, you need to make sure that your ranges are the same. And I'm going to close parentheses. So the average number of attendees for January was 12. As I did with my Countifs function, I would like to add in a little bit of error handling. In the event that there is not a value for, let's say, March, you will get a divide by zero error. One way you can get around that is by telling Google Sheets what it should insert if an error. And so going back to my original formula, I'm going to do if error. So if when Sheets executes the average if function, it returns an error, comma, I want you to return a dash, close parentheses. I'm going to absolute some of my cell references before I drag my formula down. So I want to make sure this doesn't move and this doesn't move. And the only thing I want to move in the match is the row number. Enter. And I can now drag this down. And this is showing me the average number of attendees by month. You may also want to specify the number of decimal places that can be included, and you can do that by going to your toolbar and just selecting decrease decimal spaces. I now want to show the total number of sessions offered, and I'm going to do this using the Countif function. So I'm going to click in my cell here, equals Countif. And the first thing I want to specify with Countif is the criteria range, and that would be the coaching topic. So session D, we're going to go down to D500, and now I want to specify the criteria, which would be everything in session D that matches the word Google. Hit enter. I'm going to add in my error handling. I want it to return nothing. Absolute my references. And now I can drag this down. The last feature I want to add to my dashboard is a search function that will show the average attendance for the month selected based upon the coach's name. Now you'll notice that this box right here is interactive, and so as I change my month, the month name changes in this field. And the way that you do that, I'm going to click in my cell, is you put in your text in open quotes. Where you want the month to insert, you do a closed quote and enter the cell where the month will appear, and here it's C5 because that's where my drop-down menu is, and I did an open quote with a space and the rest of my statement. This is really just a basic concatenate formula. I did the same thing in the next one to show the average attendance for the month selected. So here we have average attendance for and C5 and then a colon. I want to insert a drop-down menu here that shows my coaches' names. And so I'm going to highlight my cell. I'm going to go to Data, Validation, select Range. I've already typed my coaches' names here for chart data too, so I'm just going to reuse this by highlighting their names and click OK, Save. And going to my dashboard, I can now see that my coaches' names are appearing in my drop-down menu. I now need to create my search feature, and I'll do this using index and match. The index function is a lot like a VLOOKUP, except that you can make it interactive by pairing it with match. Index will return a value or the reference to a value from within a table or range, and it takes 3 parameters: the range you want to look at, the column number, and the row number. So the first thing I'm going to need to do before I can do my index and match is to set up a conversion table. So going to List and Conversion, I've done this already at the top of my sheet where I have the months laid out and the coaches' names. All I want to do is to show the average number of attendees by month. And in order to do that, I'm going to use my average ifs formula. So equals average ifs. I'm going to specify the range I want average, so that would be E. And you'll notice this is a little bit different from the average if formula where you specify the range you want averaged last. So that's the range I want averaged, and now I'm going to specify my criteria. So I want it for a given month. I'm going to go down to 500, and I want that month to match B2. So it's going to match across this line right here. And I want it to also only return values for Ann Jones. And so I'm going to go back to import, and I'm going to go from B2 to B500 where it matches Ann Jones. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to add in my error handling. So if this is an error, I want it to return nothing. I'm going to absolute my references. I want the column reference to be able to move as I drag my formula to the right. And then as I drag my formula down, I want the row reference to be able to move. And so now what I can do is just take this, I'm going to drag it to the right, and then I'm going to drag this down, and then drag it over for each of my data collectors. Now that I've converted my data, I'm ready to add in my search feature. This is going to return values based upon selections of month and name. I'm going to start building my formula, so I'm going to start with index. The first parameter of this function is to specify the array where your data is housed. And you only specify the data, so you don't need to include the names and you don't need to include the months. Once I've specified that, the next thing I need to tell index is what row do I want it to return a value for. And this is where you can add in interactivity using match. And so I'm going to say match, close parentheses. I want you to find the row where this name is listed. So I highlight cell E2, comma, and here are my rows. And this is going to return a value. And so here, because I have Clayton Green selected from my drop-down menu, this is going to return 3. And it's going to tell index to look for data only in row 3 of what I have highlighted. You'll notice that this is different from the actual row numbers on the spreadsheet. Index only responds again to data that you have selected, and all of your references to rows and columns are going to be relative. I next want to tell match that I want an exact match, and so I'll do comma, 0, close parentheses. I next need to tell index what column I want it to return values for, and so I'm going to use match again, and I want it to return the column that matches the value in my drop-down menu. So cell C5, comma, I'm going to highlight my range here, and I want an exact match. And again, right now, because I have January highlighted, this is going to return a 1. And now that my formula is complete, I hit enter, and let's test it out. And so looking at my chart, I can see that Ann Jones provided some coaching in the month of January. Let's see if this works. She provided coaching for it looks like one session and had an average attendance of 15. If I want to look at Bob Smith, I just select Bob Smith. Index and Match is a very powerful feature because, as you can see, it's essentially a search feature that you can set up using drop-down menus and adds that extra bit of interactivity to your dashboard.